What's up guys? In this video, I want to give you a no BS guide of how you can lose the most amount of weight in the fastest amount of time possible without a restrictive diet, buying expensive supplements, having an overly complicated routine, or living at the gym. And this is based on me being an online personal trainer and a nutritionist for the last 5 years. And in that time, I've helped well over 100 guys to do exactly this. So let's get straight into it, shall we? The first thing you need to understand is the principle of fat loss and of weight loss. There's a lot of methods that sit under this principle, and they come in various forms of diets and exercise training methodologies. For example, you have veganism and carnivore, you have paleo, keto, all sorts of other things, diets like that, Atkins, but you also have time restrictive eating where people will do intermittent fasting, which is skipping breakfast basically. These are all methods and they can be very effective, but the principle that sits above all of those is basically creating what we call a calorie deficit. But before we even talk about calorie deficits, the first thing we need to do is to help you to understand what your maintenance calorie number is. How many calories you need to consume to just maintain, to stay the same. And this is a unique number to you because it's based on 4 physiological factors: your age, your weight, your height, and your sex, but also your activity level, how active you are day to day as a person. And I don't just mean how often you're training in the gym or going for runs. I'm talking about how active your job is. Whether you're a type of person who's very fidgety, whether you talk a lot, how much you use your brain, because your brain is the most metabolic organ in the body. It burns anything between 600 to 1,000 calories per day. Now, there are far more complicated equations and methods to figure out your maintenance calories, which I use with my clients when I first start working with them. But the rough and ready rudimentary equation that you can do right now, you can stop this video right now, pause it or wait till the end, preferably, is literally just to take your body weight in pounds, not in kilograms, in pounds, and to multiply it by 15, okay? Like I say, it's rough and ready, it's not a perfect science, but it's gonna give you a lot more awareness than most people on this planet even have. The next thing you want to do is then just do a 3-day food audit. You don't need to change much, if anything. You just need to be religiously tracking how much food, how many drinks are passing your mouth. Anything that goes in your mouth, you're tracking. And you can track this on very straightforward free apps like MyFitnessPal. And this is just going to help you to build an awareness of how much you're actually consuming. Because the chances are, if you're watching this video, you want to lose weight. If you want to lose weight, the chances are you have been in a calorie surplus, which is where you've been consuming more calories than you are effectively needing, which is why your body is storing them as adipose tissue, fat tissue, okay? Stored energy, essentially. Once you've calculated your maintenance calories, once you've then done that 3-day food audit, you want to think about creating that calorie deficit. But if you think about it, there's 2 ways to creating the calorie deficit. There's eating less and there's moving more. So before we get into which one of those to do, or maybe a bit of both, let me talk to you about how big that deficit should be. Most people will say to you that your calorie deficit, you should aim for about 500 calorie deficit per day. And the reason they're saying that is because the maths adds up quite nicely. If you multiply 500, the size of the deficit, by 7 days in the week, that adds up to 3,500. And there are 3,500 calories in 1 pound of body fat. So that means if you were to sustain the calorie deficit for 7 days, 1 week, you're going to lose 1 pound of body fat. Now, it doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to lose 1 pound of body weight, because there's big differences between body fat and body weight. Your body weight is predominantly influenced by how much water weight you're holding on to. And at any one point, you could be 60 to 80% of your overall mass will be water. And there's a lot of factors that will influence your water weight, which unfortunately you can't really, you don't need to be manipulating them. You're not a boxer, you're not a UFC fighter or anything like that. So you don't want to be doing anything drastic like dehydrating yourself or anything like that. But so what I'm saying, I'm telling you that because I don't want you to be disheartened after 1 or 2 weeks of following this principle and you're not seeing the weight come off on the scales, because as long as you're adhering to that deficit and you're being honest with yourself about it, you will be losing body fat, okay? So the thing with the 500 calorie deficit is it's great and it's fantastic in principle, and in theory, but in practice, it's not necessarily the best approach. And the reason I say that is because we're human beings. We have emotions, we have social schedules and stuff like that. Things don't always go to plan. We have bad days, we have stressful times, we have meals out, we have impromptu drinks, we have all these things. So what do you do when that happens? Well, let's say you don't stick to your deficit one day, you're just gonna feel guilty, you're gonna feel worse about it. So what I encourage my clients to do is, first and foremost, we calculate their maintenance number. So let's say just for argument's sake, very rough and ready, easy maths, my maintenance calorie number is 2,500 calories, okay? If I went to create a 500 calorie deficit, I'd be consuming 2,000 calories per day, right? So what I would do is I would multiply that number, 2,000, by 7, because there's 7 days in the week. If I do that, that now tells me that I've got 14,000 calories to consume every single week. And if I do that, I'll be hitting my deficit and I'll be losing 1 pound of body fat. It gives me a lot more freedom and a lot less restriction, because it means on like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, maybe even Thursday, where like, let's be honest, they're like the boring days of the week where everyone's just head down, going through the daily grind, working hard. There's less social pressure, there's less stuff going on, and it's easier to adhere and sort of front load the hard work. And then Friday comes around or Saturday comes around and you've got date night with the missus, or you've got drinks with the boys, or girls night, whatever it might be, and you want to have a few drinks, you want to eat something that's tasty, whatever, then you've got more calories in the bank and you can have higher calorie days at the back end of the week. Now, of course, you don't have to do it like that, but just gives you a lot less restriction, a lot more freedom if you do it that way. But rather than just thinking, well, I'll just eat 500 calories less per day, because again, that sounds nice in theory, but slightly more complicated in practice, why don't you eat 250 calories less and move 250 calories more? But I'm not talking about, like I said, living in the gym. I'm not talking about having an overly complicated routine, because if you think about it, even if you were to train like Arnold Schwarzenegger back in his heyday, where he was training 6 days a week, 2 hours a day, you're still going to be spending less than 5% of your time in the gym. People don't necessarily realize this, but when it comes to weight loss, the gym doesn't actually play that much of a massive role. Now, of course, it has huge benefits when it comes to body composition, when it comes to mental health, when it comes to confidence. And I'd strongly encourage you, if you're not already, to be jumping on a sort of a full body, progressively overloading resistance training program that uses has compound movements and follows progressive overloading. But don't feel like you have to go crazy and train 6 days a week and that's going to be the needle mover, because it really isn't. What I think is the biggest needle mover and is so underrated is walking. The clients who see the best results when they're working with me are the ones who understand their maintenance calorie number, they're tracking their food, and then they're walking a lot. 12 to 15,000 steps a day, and my clients are losing about 1 kilo per week. And you might be thinking, wow, well that's a really aggressive target. Maybe you're thinking, I have no idea how many steps I even do a day. Well, that's your first port of call, right? If you haven't already, get on your phone. Pretty much every smartphone has a pedometer, or sort of something that measures how many steps you're taking, just built into it. If you've got an iPhone, go on the health app. If you've got an Android, I think it will be in some sort of health app or settings or something. I'm sure you can find it. If for whatever reason your phone doesn't have one, you can download a free pedometer app, and I would encourage you to do that today, just so the data is being collected in the background. And what I would say right at the beginning, don't go from 0 to 100. Don't run before you can walk, obviously. But let's say you're walking as much as the average Brit, which is about 4,000 steps per day. Maybe in the first couple of weeks, you're going to aim for 6,000 or 8,000 per day. That's, a 50 to 100% increase in what you're currently doing. But a little bit like the calories, the first thing you want to be doing is just building some awareness. How many steps are you actually taking per day? Because if you can go from, let's say, 4,000 now per day, and in 3 months' time, you're doing 12 or 14,000, that is going to burn so many more calories every single day. And walking is insanely good for you, from not just from a physical health point of view, but also from a mental health point of view, because it activates your parasympathetic nervous system, which is part of your nervous system which is associated with rest, relaxation, and recovery, and resetting as well. It's when we look up and we look into the distance. Magical things happen in our brain. I'm not a neuroscientist, but it's pretty incredible what can happen. The other thing about walking is you can multitask while you're doing it. My favorite thing to do is listen to a podcast, but you've got audiobooks. And the other thing you can do, of course, if you have a corporate job or you're sat behind a desk a lot, is you can do phone calls on the walks. Great story, I had a client of mine who I worked with about 2 to 3 years ago, and she was the leader of a city council in the UK. And she was on calls basically from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. every single day. Incredibly hardworking, very inspirational woman. And she really struggled with getting her steps in. So one day when I was doing a check-in with her, I said, right, let's look at your calendar. Let me actually have a look at this for you. Let me try and help you solve this problem. And we looked at her calendar. We found that every single week, she had 8 calls with her direct reports in her team. And they were each scheduled for 1 hour. So that was 8 hours per week she was spending on the phone, catching up with her team. They weren't necessarily like the most structured or like, recorded calls. They weren't with clients. They weren't external. They were quite relaxed and casual and catch-up sort of vibe, And I said to her, I was like, well, why don't you do those calls on the move? And she said, you know what, that's a really good idea. And I can guarantee you this, especially if you're a leader within your team, within your business, if you say to the junior person, hey man, guess what? Like, let's not do this on Zoom. They're gonna be so grateful because no one wants to be sat on Zoom anymore. Everybody hates it. Also, the fact that 80% of meetings are basically pointless means that you probably don't need to be on Zoom for the vast majority of them. So if you are someone like myself, I worked in the corporate world for 10 years, I know what it's like, and you're behind a desk a lot of the time. If you have the ability to be able to take some of your meetings on the phone, old-fashioned, on phone, AirPods, whatever it might be, I'd strongly encourage you to do that. You'll also find that when you're on these calls and you're walking around, you'll be more creative, you'll be more relaxed, you'll be more productive. And you won't necessarily be rushing through it or feeling like you just want to get to the end of the call because then it's over, because you're just out and you're enjoying your walk. So I get it, people are busy. But if you're really focusing on your health, if you really want to lose weight and you want to do it the fastest way, and let's be honest, relatively easy, I would create a small 250 calorie deficit, or if you want, you can still go for the 500 calorie deficit, but then I would move more. I would do more steps. My clients, I've got 2 clients right now, they are both averaging about 15,000 steps per day. And like clockwork, they are losing 1 kilo, which is over 2 pounds per week. Per week. That means every 6 weeks, they're losing a stone. One of the guys has been doing it now for 10 weeks. He's literally lost 10 kilos. Another guy has been doing it 14 weeks. He's lost 14 kilos. It is so damn predictable. It is crazy. So guys, it's going to be a shift. You're going to have to make sacrifices, but guess what? Every change requires sacrifice. So if this is something you want and you don't want to be going to the gym more and you don't want to be eating like a rabbit and you don't want some overly complicated routine or some crazy expensive supplements, this, trust me, is going to be an incredibly effective, simple, and low energy and low effort solution for you. You will see the weight melt off of you. So that's it. I hope this video was useful. If it was, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, leave me a comment. Let me know if there's anything else you'd like to talk about. If you feel like I brushed over something or went too quickly over something and you want a bit more clarity, more than happy, I'll be in the comments as always. And as always, I'll see you tomorrow.